You hear that sound? That is the wind of change. That's right. Orange and blue today, Friday. Mace is in Detroit. The Broncos face the Lions on Saturday night. Playoff chances are on the line. And how are they going to win? We're here to break that down today. Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason, OBT is a BFD, and we appreciate you all for joining the program today on a Friday. Mace, I'm sure you'll be happy to get a tiny bit of a break after this game on Saturday, huh?
I will. There's the mini bye, which follows a Thursday night game.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the mini bye that
The
follows
micro
a Saturday. Yes, the micro bye that follows a Saturday game. You get that Sunday off, and you get it a little bit longer. So, not too bad. Not
too shabby. How do the Broncos beat the Lions? Mace, for me, we can get into pressuring Jared Goff. That is largely the largest key in my opinion. But how do the Broncos beat the Lions? They have to deal with that speed. This is speed they haven't seen from a team standpoint. I don't want to scare everybody, but since Miami.
Exactly. And this is going to require a lot of work on the back end, and it's also going to require pressuring Jared Goff because he doesn't respond well to pressure. But then if you're going to pressure him, you got to make sure that wherever the hot read's going, you've got that covered so you anticipate where he's going to throw the ball. And that, if you can do that, that's going to set you up for takeaways. And that's really still the Broncos' success equation on defense. They're going to give up yards. Can they generate takeaways? It's what Green Bay did on Thanksgiving. We've talked about that. If the Broncos can do that on Saturday, they've got a good chance to come out with a win.
They've got a chance to come out with a win, and it is the defensive forcing turnovers. It's the defense adjusting to a tight end that can run, multiple wide receivers that can run, including a gadget guy and our dear friend Khalif Raymond. I still love Khalif Raymond. I thought it was a great story coming out of college there with the Broncos. You've got the speed in the backfield as well. So basically everywhere you look, you have big play and explosion for the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, exactly. It's you have to go back to Miami for the last time you saw this kind of collection of skill position players, this kind of collection of speed, and also this much pre-snap motion. Vance Joseph talked about all of these things yesterday. Let's roll that bean footage.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And the team speed is very similar with Gibbs and Williams. Those guys can really run. So it's going to be a challenge to communicate fast and be in right positions, because if you're not, you're chasing that speed, it can be bad. We've been there before. So, having a plan that calms our guys down early, but also, stay in attack mode. So I'm also, not just be on our heels. But it's a challenge. Every Sunday is something different. And this team is multiple as far as personnel and multiple as far as concepts. And they have speed, so that makes it scary.
Yeah, they have speed, and they use personnel to make it look heavy, Mace. And they're not heavy. They're going speed. Sean Payton talked about that, right? They run out of two-back system, which he loves.
Yeah, well, you've got Dan Campbell there, who's a Sean Payton protege. So it stands to reason that conceptually you're going to see some things that are very much in common with the Broncos. But what you could say is that the Lions are capable of doing things at a more advanced level, partially because the quarterback is doing the full field stuff, and partially because the collection of weapons at the skill positions does exceed those that the Denver Broncos have on offense. So it and also it doesn't hurt that they're in the third year of this scheme, whereas the Broncos are in year one of this. Check back with the Broncos a couple of years from now. Let's see how it looks. Maybe it looks a little bit like Detroit, but right now they're not in Detroit's class in terms of speed and skill.
Yeah, not there yet, but this is what they're building to. And when it comes down to it, Mace, I look at the blitzes that they will bring the funk. Brad D says it, bring the funk on Goff. That's fine. What if they pick him up? I mean, this game, which I have as a close game, a close win for the Broncos, this game could come down to one of those big plays where you blitz Goff, but you don't get to him quite, and he finds Jameson Williams down the field.
Well, you've got to anticipate where he's going when he's under pressure. That's the thing, and that's where your preparation, your film study is going to come into play. What you're going to try to do, ideally, is get him to throw in the direction of Pat Surtain, right? But you imagine schematically that the Lions are going to try to avoid that. If there's going to be a difference-making play that comes from the secondary, it's probably coming from Jaquan McMillan, Fabian Moreau, or one of the safeties. And this is where it'd be interesting to see how they use Justin Simmons and PJ Locke. Do they show blitz, pull them, drop into coverage? So maybe you have some elements where you show blitz with them, show blitz with Jaquan McMillan, use that as a disguise, get him to throw to the area he thinks is vacated, and it turns out you've got a defender waiting for him. I think these are things that the Broncos are going to try to do on Saturday night. This is going to be a really fascinating match between Ben Johnson and Vance Joseph, offense versus defense. A couple of coaches who are going to be getting some interviews next month. It's a good litmus test for both of them. Frankly, if the Broncos play well and win and the defense makes some big plays, this could be a resume tape for Vance Joseph going through that process.
Right, and honestly, it would do the opposite for Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson will still get interest. Hell, he's likely to get a job before Vance Joseph, be that as it may.
They like offensive coaches.
Everyone wants offense, but the slide they've been on, if Broncos put it to them, okay, that could change things for Ben Johnson there. Just the way you set this up, Mace, and the way that I've thought about this game, writing my game plan, denversports.com, doesn't it seem like a Justin Simmons game? Doesn't it seem, because Surtain won't travel with the sun god. Everyone's like, oh, just keep him on the sun god, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, no, he won't. But when you bait Goff into a bad throw, which he can be baited, then there's Justin Simmons to get the pick.
Well, other thing that you talk about with Justin Simmons, and it's making takeaways because no one has more interceptions in the safety position the last few years than him. Let's look at the Lions' last 6 games. The giveaways that they've had. 3 against the Raiders, none against the Chargers, 4 giveaways against the Bears, 3 giveaways on Thanksgiving Day against the Packers, none against the Saints, 3 giveaways against the Bears last week, a game they lost 28-13. This is the key. The last couple of weeks, the takeaways have largely dried up. Of course, there was that big takeaway early against the Chargers, but no takeaways against the Texans. This is a game where if the Broncos are going to win, it's probably going to need to look a lot like the wins they had over Kansas City, Buffalo, Minnesota, Cleveland, where takeaways are the driver that makes this thing go.
Yeah. You've got to watch out for this team. We're watching Josh Reynolds on the injury report. I bring it up because I think it's Brad here. He's like, PS2 and McMillan, Cease. Yeah, Detroit has like 5 guys. Okay. Detroit has like 5 receiving weapons. And for me, Mace, what I'm most concerned about as I look at my game plan and I watch the film again, it's any sort of receiver out of the backfield. It's any sort of flat route, wheel route, Jahmyr Gibbs on Alex Singleton. You're toast. Like, you're done. There's ways for this Lions team to pick on him. So PS2 and McMillan are great. Awesome. That's stopping 2 of the 5 weapons they have in the passing game.
Yeah, and Jahmyr Gibbs hasn't been incredibly explosive as a receiving back, but they've targeted him a lot. He's incredibly steady. He's going to get you about 6 yards per catch. He's averaging 5 yards per attempt. David Montgomery, not quite as active. Jahmyr Gibbs has 45 catches. Montgomery only has 12. But he's averaging a little more per reception. I mean, right, this is... These two, I mean, and we're talking about them in the passing game, but it's a 1-2 punch when they're on the ground as well. This is something we're talking about to all the receiving targets. Let's also have a conversation about the Broncos' run defense, which is still not all the way there. Still has some significant gaps in the box that we're seeing week after week. And you have 2 backs coming in here who are averaging 5.4 and 4.8 yards per carry in Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. They can, they can come at you in waves. I mean, even Craig Reynolds coming off the bench can provide some punch as well. I mean,
Netflix, Craig Reynolds.
Yeah, this is this is a troublesome matchup for the Broncos, potentially. And it's one where you start looking at all the weapons, you start looking at all the things Detroit can do, and if you don't get the takeaways, this is going to be a long night. Detroit's going to get some yards. I think they'll probably end up with 400-plus yards. If you get takeaways, you've got a chance. If you're not getting those takeaways, if they're getting 7 instead of 3 in the red zone, this is trouble for the Broncos. And you're facing a Lions team that, with losses in 2 of the last 3 games here, they're coming in. I don't think they're fading. I just think they're in a little bit of a rut, and they may come in tomorrow night and feel some heat from the Vikings. If the Vikings go to Cincinnati and win early in the game, early in the day. That's the first game of the triple-header on Saturday. And all of a sudden, the Vikings are sitting there. They can get back within a game of the Lions. And, oh, by the way, the Vikings and Lions play twice in the final 3 weeks of the season. Detroit's going to start feeling some pressure. And the question is, that pressure going to make it diamond, or the pressure going to cause the pipes to burst?
Right.
Well, we're fixing to find out.
Yeah, we will see what happens with the Detroit Lions. Brad also says in the chat room, Laporta bothers me. The weapons they have, Mace, if you put together the proper game plan and your players execute, you can move the ball and score and beat the Denver Broncos, and that's what concerns me. Getting Goff off of his spot, rushing him, making him go into like panic mode or ghost mode, that's key for the Denver Broncos, because Laporta is a seam ripper, and he's a problem. Running backs, the receivers out of the backfield, they're a problem. All the wide receivers are problems. Like, it's going to be a challenge for this Broncos defense. Oh, no, they're without Nick Bonito. I think that's a big deal, Mace. How about you?
It's not the biggest deal. It's not as big a deal as it would have been earlier in the season. It's a big deal because now you're going to have Drew Sanders playing more, and he's somebody who's still trying to find his way and figure things out. Is Drew Sanders ready to be counted on? Ready or not, they're going to have to count on him on Saturday, because they're going to need him to be explosive off the edge. And maybe this is just a game where, given where Drew Sanders is at in terms of mastering the scheme, you're telling him, see ball, get ball, see QB, get QB. Keeping it that simple for him.
Yeah, go get it. And I think that kid can go get it. We'll see if he impresses more on outside than he has it inside. Kyle brings up something interesting as we transition to the Broncos offense. And it is running the ball. It is using clock management. I agree with Kyle in terms of, you run the ball, you eat the time of possession. You can do that against Detroit. However, and as our man Reggie McDaniel always used to say, there's always a however in life. If Detroit's scoring touchdowns and you're kicking field goals, that can only work so much. You've got to... Russell Wilson, got to use your arm, man. It's another game setting up like Houston, where it's like, okay, Russ, if you can use your arm, you can win in this one. Pretty solid win if you can get more from your passing game.
Well, the other side of that is you gotta limit him in the red zone defensively. Like, if we're sitting there at halftime and the Lions have 4 field goals, I think you're feeling pretty good. Even though the Lions may have 300 yards by then, if they got 4 field goals, you're feeling all right. But if not, if they're taking advantage of some of those opportunities, it's going to have to be Russell Wilson doing the one thing he's actually done really well this year, which is throw in the red zone, right? I mean, that's been effective. Courtland Sutton's been terrific. You're going to have to lean on Jeudy, though, at some point, because Judy's going to keep getting those opportunities because coverage is going to shade towards Sutton in the red zone. Judy's going to get shots, and he's going to have to make sure he finishes the job, something he talked about this week.
Yeah, something that he readily admitted. And also Adam Troutman, when we talked to him in the locker room, he mentioned what you brought up a little bit earlier, Mace, is like Detroit's built what the Broncos are now building, and they've used them kind of as the pattern. Let's go ahead and play that. Listen to Adam Troutman as he talks about how they're trying to build like Detroit did.
They've built something in that. Dan Campbell has built something in that building that we are building here. That's what obviously we tried to mirror with the message off of what they did last year. And we're following the same track. And I mean, both teams pride themselves on being super physical and making the other team, buckle their chin strap up a little extra tight. So we're excited for the opportunity to play them.
It's like future self against past self.
Yeah, it's interesting that the Broncos are trying to do what the Lions did, and the Lions have the coach that worked under Sean Payton, right? So
Mhm.
the Broncos are trying to mimic what the protege did. The master's trying to mimic
Right.
the protege a little bit. Um, it's a fascinating turnabout, but also look at where they are in terms of their process, in terms of their timeline. This is
Mhm.
year 3 for Dan Campbell in Detroit. It's year 1 for Sean Payton in Denver. They're at different spots. Um, but by this point last year, it was the Lions' second year with Dan Campbell. But you can argue they were starting at a much lower point than the Broncos were in 2023. The Lions they were at bottom in 2021. I'd argue that the Lions in 22 are kind of where the Broncos are now. And those Lions late last year, that was a team that was already proving capable of winning some big games. I mean, they started off 1-6 and came roaring back. But, in that run to get back into it last year, they beat the Giants, who were a playoff team last year. They beat the Jaguars, who won a playoff game last year. They beat the Packers, who were in playoff contention twice. Effectively, the Lions knocked Aaron Rodgers' last Green Bay Packers team out of the playoffs because they beat them twice, once in Detroit at midseason, and then, of course, the Sunday night season finale when the Lions had nothing to play for and the Packers had everything to play for, and Detroit still went out there and won in Lambeau Field 20-16. That's the kind of makeup this Detroit Lions team had. And so from 1-6 to 9-8 last year, this Broncos team's 1-5. It's 7-6 now. You can kind of see the parallels. You hope we're talking about the Broncos building next year much the same way that the Detroit Lions did this year. I mean, if we're talking look at the Lions since that 1-6 start last year. They closed 8-2 and they're 9-4 this year at 17-6. If the Broncos have a similar run like that from 1-5, we're talking about them contending for the number 1 seed in the AFC next year.
Right.
But it's going to feel a bit different if the Broncos are going to the playoffs, whereas the Detroit Lions just missed.
Right. Yeah. And the Broncos started from a better spot than Detroit did. But look at that draft, Mace. I get draft envy at times. Look at that draft. Look at what they've done. And I'll even point back to the New Orleans Saints in 2017 when they had 4 all-pros. Ryan Ramczyk, Marshawn Lattimore, Alvin Kamara, and Trey Hendrickson, who we saw at the Shrine game. Like that, you get a draft, you get 4 all-pros like that. That's significant, and that certainly helped Sean Payton and the Saints after the 7-9, 7-9, 7-9 doldrums. 2017 boosted that team. The Broncos could boost themselves with a solid draft, more playmakers, as the Lions have assembled their playmakers, both offensively and defensively.
Well, then the Broncos need to stop trading away picks, right? I mean,
I think the Broncos need a different GM. You can disagree with me because you might disagree with me, but I think George Payton's a great scout. I don't think he's a good GM. I think it's 2 different skill sets.
Who do you think made the Riley Moss trade this year, George Payton or Sean Payton?
Sean Payton runs a lot now.
Okay.
Sean Payton runs a lot. Yeah.
Because I'm looking right now and I think, boy, it would be nice to have that 3rd-round pick back and have 2 3rd-round picks next year.
Yep.
Nope. And Riley Moss, we'll see where he goes. I'm not writing him off just yet, but haven't gotten much from Riley Moss. By the way, I know it was pointed out on social media today. I saw somewhere you don't have any 22 draftees that are part of the Broncos starting lineup right now, or really going to be a factor beyond rotational work. I mean, and that's a George Payton draft. Now, you didn't have the 1st or 2nd round picks because the Russell Wilson trade. You didn't pick until Nick Bonito at the end of the 2nd round, and he came aboard in the Von Miller deal. But here we are towards the end of year 2. The best player from that draft class is leading you in sacks, but he's a rotational player, and he's not going to play Saturday. That's Nick Bonito. And then your 3rd-round pick, Greg Dulcich, can't stay healthy. One of your 4th-round picks, Eni Iwazurike, has been suspended for gambling. Another of your 4th-round picks, Damari Mathis, is buried on the bench right now. Man. It's not looking good. That 2022 draft is I don't like it right now.
Stings the nostrils. I'm not gonna say it. You almost got to the 5th round, Mason. I was like, I'm not gonna say it. I'm not gonna say it. But I'm gonna say
Montreal
this.
Washington. I said his name.
And Delarian Turner-Yell. If you had Tariq Woolen and Isaiah Pacheco,
Here we go.
bam. I just said it. Sorry, I said I wasn't gonna say it. Anyway, I digress. You can look to this game and you can win. Now, Holy Diver mentioned something that I would like to see, and Kyle also brings up something I would like to see. McLaughlin on that turf, baby. McLaughlin, speed. Well, the Broncos got some speed. Maybe it's a Jaleel, even like a play. I'm not saying 80-yard touchdown, but, a big play, a gashing play, some scamper, 30, 40 yards, something like that. And also, Kyle brings it up. Tempo. Will the Broncos use tempo as a weapon in this game? I believe that's a possibility.
I believe it's a definite possibility because you're going to want to limit the Lions' chances. This is a game where the Broncos are going to try to put the brakes on things. The Lions are going to want to go full throttle. Broncos are going to want to play this game at a deliberate pace. Absolutely, tempo is going to be a part of it. Taking a look at the Lions this year and looking at this is not a team that really needs to have a huge time of possession advantage, although it has behooved them. In fact, I'm actually looking here. Last week against Chicago Bears possessed the ball for 33 minutes and 19 seconds, nearly 6.5 minutes more than the Detroit Lions did. Not that wasn't what Detroit wanted at all. So the Lions are going to want to possess the ball as well. The Broncos, though, need to play keep away, need to keep those possessions down. You want this thing to be about an 8-possession game on each side. If it gets to like 10, 12 possessions on each side, it's the danger zone for Denver.
Danger zone. Nate Albert, one of our favorites. You're all our favorites in the chat room. But Nate says, get Mims involved. Speed, again. You got speed? Broncos got some speed, too. I'd like to see it. Not counting on it, Mace. But I'd like to see it.
Well, you got to use them right. The way they used him at the start of last week, it wasn't his kind of route, and it wasn't a good throw by Russell Wilson. There you go. You're starting the game with a pick. You don't want to start this game that way. Okay. You see, the Chargers have no home field advantage. The Lions do. And the other thing is also, the Lions don't have the Lions don't lose control of their emotions in play calling in the red zone and decision making as to whether to go for it or whether to kick the way that the Chargers do. So if you give the ball away in this game, expect to pay. Expect to pay in the same way you did against Houston, another pretty smart team.
Kev asked super quick as we were wrapping up today's program, Mace. Do you see him going after Ertz? Broncos are a contender, and I had to push back on Mike Evans because he was like, Ertz is going to go to a contender. Well, what the hell are the Broncos?
Yeah.
They're a contender.
You think Ertz is waiting on Philadelphia, though? I think he is.
Yeah, and I've heard that, it's just going to happen when it happens, And Goddard came back. Had Goddard suffered a setback or something, then maybe Ertz would already be with Philadelphia. But, yeah.
It can happen. It can happen whenever. So I'm not getting my hopes up on that one. If the Broncos want to get more out of the tight end position, it's going to have to come in the form of Lucas Kroll, at least in the short term. All indications are that he's going to be on the 53-player roster for the game. The Broncos are going to move him up. They've got that spot created by waiving Ronnie Perkins yesterday. Sounds like it's going to be Lucas Kroll who's going to have that position. And I think if you're going to get anything out of the tight end tight end position from a pass catching element, as I stumble over my words here, it's going to have to be Kroll finding it. I don't think it's coming from anybody else. As John Fox would say, no one's coming to save us.
Love Foxy. Could quote him all day. What's the final Troutman clip? I forgot. It was about experience, right? Because we had him talking about how they're built like Detroit.
Yeah.
Can't get too high
well,
with the highs, right?
Right. Well, it's also can't get too high, but you've also got to kind of you've got to stay on the level here. You're playing big, high leverage games now, right? You don't want to let the emotion overwhelm you. You want to stay on the level. Experience does matter, and let's roll that beautiful beam footage.
Execution, not letting the emotion get
Yeah, I think that's something I think it comes with experience, honestly. Like there's a lot of younger guys that are going to be like show more emotion. A lot of times than like older veterans who've been around and understand like to stay calm, because you can never get too high and you can never get too low in this league, because you never know when you're gonna get punched in the face, or honestly when you're gonna have one of those high modes you score a touchdown. So or whatever the case is, whatever at your position. But yeah, you just can't get too high, too low.
And this could be a punch you in the face type of game on both sides, by the way.
Those punches might not be physical punches, though. They might be haymakers in terms of explosive plays down the field,
Touchdown. Right.
So it might be a fun game to watch if you're a neutral observer. If you're rooting for one of the teams, it might be a high wire act, but for those who are just sitting back, having a cool one and watching the game, it'll be fun.
You'll be a neutral observer in the press box, Mace. The only time I've ever seen the press box emotional, Tebow to Demarius against the Steelers.
I will
That's the
say
only time I've ever seen it. You might have seen more. You've been in the press box more than me, but how do you deny overtime first play 80 yards Demarius Thomas to the house?
I think a lot of the emotion was a lot of writers realizing they had to rewrite their stories in a flash. To be fair, myself included.
That happens.
Yeah, part of the job.
Mm-hmm.
I recall the one other moment I recall was just kind of gasping almost in horror when Drew Lock misread the read option 2 years ago and kept it and then got the ball stripped from him.
Bengals game.
Yep. The moment from which it was clear there was no return for Drew Lock as a Denver Bronco.
And the Bengals went like this, and the Broncos went like this.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood. And the Bengals went to the Super Bowl, and the Broncos went to oblivion. Or as Mike Tyson would say, Bolivian.
He's a scared coward.
Fade into Bolivian.
And if you're from Belize, well, then you best Believed it. That's Shaq.
My
Shaq
gosh.
Diesel. Shaq Diesel is a great rap album. I will defend that forever. But speaking of great raps, you gonna hit a karaoke bar tonight? What are you gonna do? What's the Mace plans on a Mace Fit Friday? What do you got going, baby?
The Mace plan is gonna be a little bit quiet tonight. Just gonna rest
You sound
up.
better. You sound better.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Did I sound a little gravelly this morning?
A little bit.
Okay.
I can always tell. I can
Mhm.
always tell. I listen to your voice all the time, Mace.
Oh gosh, that's a
Is that
little
weird?
Yes. I mean,
All right.
yeah. Well, I mean, we're cutting up audio and video, right? That's the thing. So we end up listening to each other a lot. But yeah. If not for context, that could be a little bit unusual. But it's okay.
Unusual. That's fine.
We're not
That's
no
fine.
judgment here.
Get down how you get down, baby. It is orange and blue today. Let's go Broncos. It's all that matters, man. Go get that W. Keep those playoff chances going, and continue on. Prove the doubters wrong, and keep it up. Rachel said it this morning, Mace. I love when people don't talk about Denver nationally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, keep ignoring them.
Yeah.
Keep it up, and you know what they'll do? They'll just kick your ass.
Yep. They will. They absolutely will.
All right, Mace.
6 out of 7. 6 out of 7. Hottest team in football. So let's see what they can do.
Let's roll
Who's
this.
Who's to say they can't win?
Who's to say? He is Mace, IMC, SoBT is BFD. Make sure to help us out on YouTube as we grow our channel. Like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. You get to finger wag like Dikembe. No. Finger wagging. Yeah, help us out on YouTube. Grow the channel. We appreciate you all Thanks. Be good. Stay tuned and stay frosty.